everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the second part of the story Selfish Giant. Hope you all have enjoyed reading the first part of the story with me. Today we will be reading the second part of the story. Let's start with the next part of the story now. What did he see? He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in, and they were sitting in the branches of the tree. In every tree that he could see, there was a little child, and the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms and were waving their arms gently above the children's heads. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene. Only in one corner it was still winter. It was the furthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all around it, crying bitterly. The poor tree was still quite covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. "Climb up, little boy," said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could. But the boy was too tiny, and the giant's heart melted as he looked out. "How selfish I have been," he said. "Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever." He was really very sorry for what he had done. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him up into the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it, and the little boy stretched out his two arms and flung them around giant's neck and kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, came running back, and with them came the spring. "It is your garden now, little children," said the giant, and he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye. "But where is your little companion?" he said. "The boy I put into the tree." The giant loved him the best because he had kissed him. "We don't know," answered the children. "He has gone away." "You must tell him to be sure and come here tomorrow," said the giant. But the children said that they did not know where he lived and had never seen him before, and the giant felt very sad. Every afternoon when school was over, the children came and played with the giant, but the little boy whom the giant loved was never seen again. The giant was very kind to all the children, yet he longed for his first little friend and often spoke of him. "How I would like to see him," he used to say. Years went over, and the giant grew very old and feeble. He could not play about anymore, so he sat in a huge armchair and watched the children at their games and admired his garden. I have many beautiful flowers, he said, but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all. One winter morning, he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep and that the flowers were resting. Suddenly, he rubbed his eyes in wonder and looked. It certainly was a marvelous sight. In the furthest corner of the garden was a tree quite covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were all golden, and silver fruit hung down from them, and underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. Downstairs ran the giant in great joy, and out into the garden he hastened across the grass and came near to the giant. And when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger, and he said, "Who had dared to wound thee?" For on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of 2 nails, and the prints of 2 nails were on the little feet. "Who had dared to wound thee?" cried the giant. "Tell me, that I may take my big sword and slay him." "Nay," answered the child, "but these are the wounds of love." "Who art thou?" said the giant, and a strange awe fell on him, and he knelt before the little child. And the child smiled on the giant and said to him, "You let me play once in your garden. Today you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise." And when the children ran in that afternoon, they found the giant lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossom. This brings us to the end of the story. How is the story? Exciting, right? Let us discuss the theme of the story. The story has several themes. In the first half of the story, we have seen the selfishness of the selfish giant, where he was so much selfish that he couldn't allow the children to play in the garden. So one of the themes is the selfishness. Second theme could be the God and the religion, Jesus, all three. Third could be love, then the children and their innocence, and also the seasons could be another theme of the story. So after reading this story, you can discuss all these themes of the story with the children, which will give them a further clarity about the story. For grade 6 to 8 level questions, of course, you can ask them reference to context question, wherein you can quote some of the story and ask them questions related to it. They can answer, they can ponder about it and answer this question. You can ask them inference questions and insight questions as well. Insight of different characters and of course the symbols. And you can ask them the themes of the story in a vivid way. Also, you can ask them grammatical questions, where you can ask them to find out compound sentences, complex sentences, finite and non-finite verbs in the story, and some linguistic questions like the used figure of speech, idioms and proverbs. They will be finding out all these in the story. As we had discussed earlier also, for grade 3 level, always you can ask them the word meanings, the true-false questions, and fill in the blanks question. After reading the entire story, what you can give them is a jumbled story. Give them numbering and in a jumbled way, and ask them to write it in a proper sequence after reading the story. This will showcase their understanding about the story as well. You can ask them to write different adjectives for the giant before, middle, and at the end of the story. The adjectives will be changing. And also you can ask them to describe the character of the little child. How do they know the symbolic use of different these things can be asked to grade 3 to 5 level children. If you need any questions in detail or any worksheet in detail, you can always mail us in the given email ID. We will be replying to you with the worksheet and questions. Thank you for watching us.